in an internet-dominated world. So we will have around 45 minutes for the webinar proper, and we will be dedicating a question and answer session right after the talk. You can type your questions in the chat window. Personally, even though I am one of the volunteers behind R10 Talk, I feel curious and somehow excited as an IEEE volunteer when this webinar topic was proposed. The pandemic disruption is global, and we know everybody knows that. And when it strikes, members all over the world are perplexed and challenged, right? So questions like, can I still continue my volunteering? What can I contribute in an online environment? And so without further ado, let me introduce our vibrant and energetic director to give us his opening remarks and introduce our honorable speaker. So let's give a round of applause, virtual applause, to our dear art and director, Deepak Mathur.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you very much. And today, really a great moment for all of us. And thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Toshio Sam, and all my IEEE Region 10 colleagues and fellow IEEE members for joining today's 10 Talk. It's my great pleasure to welcome Kathy Land, the IEEE President, to today's Region 10 Talk. This innovative and collaborative program we started with great success this year, as I was just telling you, President Kathy. And today we all are very excited to listen to you delivering very interesting topic for this technical talk. I'm really thankful to you for joining all of us. We are joining today, all of us. And Kathy, I feel that you do not need any introduction. And you are a very familiar face to all of us. I'm really grateful to you for your participation in numerous events of Region 10. Kathy is very much approachable and very kind to all volunteers in accepting this request. Whenever I talk to our young professionals and students, they are all they are having a lot of praise for our president. And I know that despite being in a different time zone, and I know many times it is not really comfortable to join Region 10 events, but even then you are joining our activities. So we all are very much grateful. So one of the advantages, as I was just discussing with you, that this virtual world uh, was and is that we have become truly global in our approach. And we are immensely benefited by the presence of you in our events with your insightful talk. Uh, you are a leader with clarity of objectives and goals, and you possess a thoughtful leadership style, and that is really admirable. And I personally admire your decision making. And as you were telling that is also I admire that you are very candid in expressing your view. So let us. We are going to hear from we are going to hear your thoughts, and today's topic is really we are going to find very interesting. And I have seen you giving talk on many occasions. You really make topics very interesting. So IEEE in an internet dominated world is going to be we are going to hear your thoughts. So please join me in welcoming our IEEE President Kathy Land with a great round of applause, virtually, or you can use your mic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction and for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm going to share my slides. Let's see. All right, so you should be able to see. Somebody give me a thumbs up. Yes, head nod. Okay. So I am going to talk about IEEE in an internet-dominated world. It's a little different than what you might think. It's not about how IEEE supports access. It's a little different. So before I get to that, I do want to thank Region 10, SAC, for the invitation for the 10 Talk invitation. It's my privilege. I really do appreciate the opportunity whenever I'm invited, and I do try to support the invitations. For those of you who are IEEE members, thank you for being members. I'm honored to be your colleague. For those of you who are not, I hope that by attending this event, it might provide you some insight into what IEEE is all about. You might consider being a member. Student membership is currently half price. So consider that. Think about what IEEE is about. Do some research. Consider joining. If not, consider volunteering. It doesn't cost any money to support IEEE. So today my talk is entitled IEEE in an Internet-Dominated World. And what I'm going to talk about are events I see happening today in social media, its possible impact on science and technology, our community, the role that IEEE and our members must play. So, but first, I'm going to talk a little bit about the origins of the internet. The first recorded description, social interactions that could be enabled through networking, were a series of memos written by a man, J.C.R. Licklider, of MIT in August of 1968. That was quite a while ago. I think I was 5 years old. And he described these as a galactic network concept. He envisioned a globally interconnected set of computers through which everyone might quickly access data and programs from any site. So in spirit, the concept was very much like the internet of today. Licklider was the first head of the computer research program at this place called ARPA, and now we know it as DARPA in the United States, and started in 1962. So while at DARPA, he convinced his successors of the importance of this networking concept. And it was in a landmark paper. You can see sort of a screenshot of the paper on the slide, computer as a communication device. And he described a radically new organization of hardware and software designed to support many simultaneous users than the current systems, and to offer them the fast, smooth interaction required for truly effective man-computer partnership. So for Licklider, this wasn't just a new technology, but a new optimistic way for human beings to exist together in the world. So many papers have been written about the information age, and most agree that the internet has played a decisive role. The internet started in the 1960s, as I described, as a way for government researchers to share information. And I work for the government, as many of you know, and I started my career with the government. I spent many, many years in industry, but I started during the time when this internet was sort of in its beginnings. So in the 60s, now I wasn't working in the 60s, but in the 60s, computers were large and mobile. And in order to transfer information from one device to another, you either had to travel from computer to computer, you had to transfer magnetic tapes back and forth, and the process was very, very clunky. And this was around until the 1980s, and that's when I was working on computers, when I started my career, because that's the process I had to use, right? Big disk, big magnetic tapes. So we had to find a better way to share information. So another catalyst that sort of spurred this internet development was the Cold War. And this was between the US and the Soviet Union, and the Soviets' launch of Sputnik, the satellite. And this spurred the U.S. Defense Department to consider ways information could be disseminated even after a nuclear attack. So this led to the formation of Advanced Research Projects Agency Network, or ARPANET, and this network ultimately evolved into what we know as the Internet. ARPANET was designed to survive subordinate network losses, since the principal reason was that switching nodes and network links were unreliable, even without any nuclear attack. So things were pretty unreliable back then. ARPANET was a great success, but membership was limited to certain academic and research organizations. And these were organizations who had contracts or were DoD organizations. So in response to this, other networks were created to provide information sharing. On January 1st, 1983, is considered the official birthday of the internet. Prior to this, various computer networks did not have a standard way to communicate with each other. So a new communications protocol was established called Transfer Control Protocol, Internet Work Protocol, or TCP/IP. This allowed different kinds of computers on different networks to talk to each other. ARPANET, the Defense Data Network, officially changed to the TCP/IP standard on January 1st, 1983, and hence this was the birth of the Internet. All networks can now be connected by a universal standard language communication protocol. The Internet really took off in 1993 with the release of Mosaic. I don't know how many of you remember Mosaic. I remember Mosaic. It was the first browser to display images in line instead of in separate windows. So the Internet today, all would recognize it's a very powerful tool. It's used globally by researchers. An entire generation has been raised not knowing how to reference a set of encyclopedias. That's what I used when I was growing up, or you went to the library and looked at things on microfiche. We have instant access to file sharing, constant contact as communication tool. There is nothing available that provides for the ability to reach out and let someone know your opinion. Over 3.8 billion people globally have access to the Internet. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Vint Cerf. He's called one of the fathers of the Internet, and he's an IEEE fellow. He's very active in IEEE. I show this quote because it's important to remember that the Internet was designed to be open and to have no gatekeepers over its content or services. And this is what he says: the remarkable social impact and economic success of the Internet in many ways is directly attributable to the architectural characteristics that were part of its design. The Internet was designed with no gatekeepers over new content or services. And I'll ask the question later whether this is the current case. In a 2019 BBC interview, Cerf makes some statements, and I thought they were very interesting. He stated that with the arrival of social networking, that these platforms have basically become subverted and that we find ourselves challenged in trying to distinguish good information from bad. That there is a danger in the application of algorithms, as these might be leveraged as a form of censorship, which has potential of a very dark side. It goes on to say that the best tool for discernment is wetware, or the use of your brain and the exercise of critical thinking. So let me talk for a moment about whether the Internet is meeting the vision of its originators. Is it really open to the free and open exchange of ideas and information? I would state now that the original vision is fraying. The original vision was built on very specific assumptions, many of which have given way. Licklider envisioned the Internet as a patchwork of decentralized networks with no sense of how it would work when a handful of companies write most of the software today and manage most of the traffic. Licklider conceived of a level playing field for different networks and protocols with no sense of how that same openness can enable what has now become a kind of monopoly power. Most painfully, this new network was imagined as a forum for the free exchange of ideas, with no sense of how predatory and oppressive this exchange has become. Today's technology runs on a string of closed networks comprised of proprietary and monopolized app stores, social networks, and algorithmic feeds. There are some regulatory attempts to support net neutrality, and I'm not going to discuss the pros and cons or these initiatives in detail. That's enough for a separate entire presentation or discussion. However, I've referenced a couple of items from the United States here, and they're called Title II and Section 230, and you can look those up. But one thing is for sure, today's internet marketplace is a far cry from that seen as a vehicle for early internet entrepreneurs and those who wanted free and open information. So what might things look like tomorrow in the direction we're going? There's one school of thought that states that the internet is headed in the same direction if we're not careful. That, like what we saw with freely aired television that in the United States, we used to have free TV, right? So you just bought a television, put up an antenna, and then you had all the television channels. Now there's no such thing. You can get you even have to buy a digital converter box if you want to get like maybe 4 or 5 channels that are available that route. But what the thought is that the internet will be divided into subscription services that look like today's cable services. It might begin by ISPs offering tiered internet service, limiting customers' access to content, not just a faster service. In other words, your ISP charges you to access additional websites and services. In fact, there's a Portuguese internet service provider, MEO, who offers smart phone contracts with monthly data limits and sells additional monthly packages for particular data services. The first spark of the internet was open connection. Hosting a website meant anyone with a modem could dial up, stop by, and anyone with a server could set up a website. All servers ran the same set of protocols, and no provider was favored over any other. And in short, anyone connected to the same internet, even if some hosts and connections were better than others. Today's closed and proprietary networks have become far more powerful than the web, in large part by limiting what you can see, what you can distribute. And to thrive on today's internet, you need much more than a server and a dream. So is the internet free? Among the many research surveys to assess the threat of internet freedom, the most credible is the Freedom of the Net report. And this is published annually by Freedom House, and this is an NGO based in Washington, D.C. And the report is a must-read for anyone interested in the protection of internet freedoms. It contains a series of recommendations for policymakers, the private sector, and civil society. Using a comprehensive set of indicators, it has repeatedly reported declining metrics for internet users in many parts of the world since 2011. The latest publication assesses internet freedom in 65 countries, accounting for 87% of internet users worldwide. According to the latest report, propaganda, emotional manipulation, paid trolls, automated bots, and widespread surveillance are all strangling the immense potential of the internet. It finds more than 30 countries employ opinion shapers to spread government views, and also an increasing number of governments are resorting to just blanket shutdowns of communications, especially on mobile phones. For many people, freedom of the press or the internet is a subjective term. So the main question is, how do we define a free internet? This would mean an internet without major government censorship, an internet where the government does not block or filter internet content, anything related to politics or human rights or social issues. The internet should be free of government surveillance and persecution of people who write online. A representative of Freedom House recently told the media that for the 7th consecutive year, our study showcases that freedom has been in decline. This year, that decline has been due to very worrisome threats regarding government manipulation of social media. So, cancel culture. I'm sure everyone here today has heard the phrase cancel culture, but I'm going to provide a definition so that we're all level set. And I felt that Cambridge Dictionary provided the best definition, and they define it as a way of behaving in a society or group, especially on social media, in which it is common to completely reject and stop supporting someone because they have said or done something that offends you. And cancel culture can include everything from the most powerful and privileged in our society getting pushback from saying things that others have found distasteful to regular everyday people being targeted for relatively minor infractions. And this can happen when the cancel target breaks social norms, expresses opinions on politics, business, and even pop culture. And it's happening with more regularity and more frequency. There are several arguments against this type of behavior, but just for me and for those that know me, I do not like bullies. I don't believe that public shaming is the best approach when you want to address an issue that you disagree with. It doesn't end well for anyone. The person who's being called out has a ruined career or lives in fear. And I've not seen it result, and most importantly, I've not seen it result in productive discussion, ending in positive change. So a recent Harvard CAPS Harris poll, and they do exhaustive research polls, found that 64% of their respondents, when surveyed, responded that there is a growing cancel culture. They felt that this was a personal threat to their freedoms. And so I thought about this. I thought it was pretty astounding. And if you're interested, you can find this poll and look at it and dig into the data. They're very interesting polls. But George Orwell, right? So he wrote seminal works like 1984, Animal Farm. You know, they were pretty shocking when he wrote them. And he what was well known for. He revered the truth. He detested political propaganda, hated manipulation of the English language, and he wrote threats to freedom of speech, writing, and action that often trivial in isolation are cumulative in their effect, and unless checked, lead to a general disrespect for the rights of the citizen. And we should all care about individual freedoms. So this statement from the director of the Electronic Frontier Foundation echoes how many feel about putting themselves out there today on many of the social media platforms. As stated on their website, EFF's mission is to ensure that technology supports freedom, justice, and innovation for all people of the world. And I'm borrowing her words to stand in for many of my colleagues who have withdrawn from these platforms recently as the environment has become toxic. And this is what she says: those social media environments that once led to beautiful opportunities and friendships have now become toxic. In spaces where I was once likely to receive positive feedback, I now face threats and harassment on a daily basis. So here's some recent examples. Some are kind of funny, some are not so funny, but I pulled these from the news in the United States. There's some cancellations, right? Cancel culture. I want to state I have no opinion on these, but I'm just using these as they were in the news as examples. So some former U.S. presidents' names, to include Abraham Lincoln, have been wiped from San Francisco public schools after a school board decided to rename 44 schools with ties to racism and dishonorable legacies. Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head are being replaced by a gender-neutral spud. The famous author of Harry Potter series has faced backlash for voicing her fears that the push for transgender rights will ultimately endanger women's rights. Good or bad, these are part of the U.S. culture, and who decides? And there may be similar examples in the cultures where you live. But if these are removed, if these are not publicly debated or discussed, the choice is gone for everyone, right? And more importantly, the discussion that could happen, right? The public debate, the dialogue around these is prevented. In 2019, U.S. President Barack Obama weighed into the debate around cancel culture, saying it was not activism. His quote is, "If all you're doing is casting stones, you're probably not going to get that far," he told an audience at an event at the Obama Foundation. He added that he got a sense from some young people that they felt that being as judgmental as possible was the best way to force change, and cautioned them that the world was messy and full of ambiguities. A similar argument was made by a group of over 100 writers and academics when they published a letter in Harper's Magazine. And in it, they argued that cancel culture had created an intolerant climate and had weakened the norms of open debate. So as I was researching this topic, and why should we care, right? Why do we care about Mr. Potato Head, right? I did a search on the web under keywords, dangerous technologies. So as we all know, technologies and research can be used for good or bad. But I was surprised to find that there are campaigns that exist against the fundamental research and deployment of the technologies I have displayed on this slide. The fundamental research. So these include facial recognition, smart drones, artificial intelligence, deep learning, robotics, and smart dust. And there are many more. I just selected a few that I found, right? So there is a growing cancel culture against technologies. So in a recent, here's another example. So in a recent calls in the United States to boycott cities, which is having an impact on IEEE conferences. I found a disturbing item relating to the National Association of Scholars, which is a 501(c) nonprofit. This is a membership organization. IEEE is a membership organization that seeks to reform higher education. So the National Association of Scholars was co-sponsoring a conference with the Independent Institute in Oakland, California, in early February of this year, and the conference was focused on the discussion of issues associated with fake science, or not being able to reproduce the results of your research or the scientific method. One individual who disagreed with the content of the organizer set out to cancel the conference. And this is happening in IEEE conferences. I'm using this as an example, but I, as president of IEEE, I'm hearing about this. People who don't like our papers that are presented at IEEE conferences or content at our conferences have done something similar to this. So one individual disagreed, set out to cancel the conference. He wrote individually to the speakers at the event to warn them away, and then he took to social media to create a firestorm. The individuals held the conference and are quoted as saying, "The truth is that we are a traditionalist group of scholars who hold to a rigorous standard of open-mindedness on controversial issues in the sciences. We welcome critiques from anyone who agrees to play by the rules of rational argument, openness, and scrupulous use of evidence." So they stuck to their guns and held their conference anyway. This is something that those of us within IEEE who organize conferences should take note. There must always be room within our conferences for technical debate. We must welcome it. And in 2020, the IEEE created a code of conduct and safety statement to reinforce this. This code of conduct was not done by accident. We had seen evidence of bullying and harassment and things similar to the example I just provided. So, if you look at it, the statement, some of it is, you can see it, you can find the entire statement on mce.org, the link at the bottom, but it can be summarized that IEEE supports meetings, conferences, and other events that provide a safe, productive, and welcoming environment. So, while IEEE literature and publications represent the most trusted source for engineering and technology research in corporations, academia, and government, forming the foundation on which innovation and discoveries are made and disseminating new theories and findings, our editors have total independence, as they should. And sometimes our readers and members feel that a publication might push boundaries. As you see by the spectrum cover on the left, the artificial placenta, right? Maybe an article on military, ghost ships, or feeding 10 billion people, right? Sometimes some of these trigger letters to the president. I have an email address, and I don't really receive email when people are happy with IEEE. I receive email when people are unhappy, and usually it's with one of our editors. So when something is controversial, I hear about it. And they demand retractions. They demand that we fire our editors, all kinds of things. But, IEEE publications are really offer the most reliable channel. They report the most significant research advances across very diverse scientific fields. And for over a century, IEEE literature and publications have promoted and disseminated some of mankind's greatest scientific and engineering conquests, bringing technology to humanity. Technology professionals and engineers always find it challenging to stay up to date with new and changing technology. And it's paramount that we continue to support a free and independent press at IEEE. So I'm on IEEE social media, Collaboratech. Used to be on Twitter. I'm not anymore. I'm on Instagram. I know they're owned by the same parent company, but Instagram, you can pretty much control your feed, and it's all IEEE. So right now I have there are about 2,600 IEEE groups on Instagram. I think more now. And over 4,000 on Collaboratech, people that I'm connected with. And I'm very active in both of these communities. I don't see every post, but it's been a number of years, and I remain very proud of our communities because I consistently see positive and collaborative discussions on both of these social networks. And I'm not sure if it's because of our code of ethics or simply because of the caliber of people within IEEE, but I've not witnessed any of the cancel culture you might see on some other commercial feeds or groups. What I see is encouragement and support, and I wanted to mention this because if you happen to be involved in some toxic environments in social media, switch to these, and not only will you be encouraged and find support, but you might learn a thing or two. There's some very important dialogue that occurs, especially on Collaboratech. And the way to find Collaboratech is on the front page of IEEE.org, and you'll see a little CT on the upper right-hand corner, and it's free. You don't have to be an IEEE member to participate. So IEEE's Code of Conducts and Ethics and Code of Conduct was revised in 2020. These two codes speak to how an organization supports inclusivity. You cannot have diversity and inclusion without a strong code of conduct and professional ethics. So these reviews and revisions were necessary because our policies had not been seriously reviewed in many years. And the updates incorporated high-level principles intended to focus members on key elements of the code, a commitment not to engage in harassment, and the protection of the privacy of others. Upon joining, each member agrees to abide by these codes. Each year, upon membership renewal, members are required to revisit and review the codes and reconfirm their agreement. So these are all updates and changes that were made within the past 2 to 3 years. And we require this because ethics and integrity are an important part of who we are here at IEEE, but also because it's important for the collaboration and dialogue that goes on to support our mission and vision. So over the years, several research papers and reports have conclusively demonstrated the need for cognitive diversity. According to an experiment run by the Harvard Business Review, teams with a high deviation from the standard perspective or teams with high cognitive diversity are more likely to solve a problem than non-diverse teams. A Deloitte report found that cognitive and demographically diverse teams can enhance innovation by as high as 20% and identify and reduce risk by up to 30%. And a report by Gartner predicts that through 2022, 75% of organizations that boast a diverse and inclusive culture will be among the front line of decision makers and will exceed their financial targets. So organizations should care about diversity. But it's not enough to have diversity. You need to ensure that people feel free to discuss the topic. People should feel included. And you can see from the information on the slide that organizations that have inclusive cultures, and I'm not just talking about women or transgender or that, those are the hot topics right now. But what I'm talking about is if there's a group of people at the table that everyone feels like they can contribute to the dialogue, right? That's what I'm talking about. People should feel included. People should feel like that they have a voice, and we should all do our part in that. And that's why I'm talking about cancel culture right now. So you can see from this slide that that organizations that have inclusive cultures are 2 times more likely to meet or exceed their targets, 3 times more likely to be high performing, 6 times more likely to be innovative and agile, and 8 times more likely to achieve better business outcomes. So let's talk about IEEE and diversity and inclusion. Several committees within IEEE have been doing some very important work over the past number of years in support of diversity and inclusion and ethics. In 2019, the board approved the following statement for diversity and inclusion, and I'm not going to read it. It's on the slide. But I will highlight that it requires the talents and perspectives of people with different personal, cultural, and disciplinary backgrounds. And that's important, right? And that we promote an inclusive and equitable culture. So why is diversity and inclusion important for IEEE? We live in a world full of complex problems, and to solve those problems requires an environment of collaboration with active and open engagement. IEEE can uniquely provide this environment, an environment where every individual's passion and commitment is represented and respected, where people can feel engaged and empowered, and where we can all work together to support IEEE's mission to advance technology for humanity. It's vital that IEEE live up to the ideals expressed in our Code of Ethics, that IEEE be a place where people feel welcomed and included. We should welcome new and challenging ideas from everyone. This is how we move technology forward. It is my hope that we do move forward, that we work together to ensure that IEEE continues to support robust diversity of thought, where differences of opinion can be discussed and resolved collegially, and where we can find consensus in expanding and furthering IEEE's mission. So I want to talk for a minute about open technical dialogue. So I've adopted a mantra of I'm often wrong. And I don't know if it's because of the work environment I'm in. You know, it's very fast paced and it's very technical, and you really have to sometimes not take the first technical solution that's offered. But to think that your way of thinking is always right is really short-sighted. And I've seen leaders do this too often, and it really cuts a lot of people and their opinions out of the picture, and they feel minimized. And one great thing about IEEE is its focus on consensus building. I've learned much from IEEE over the years about working toward and building consensus. Reaching consensus requires listening to others, questioning your stance, and collegial discussion. Good technology requires diversity of thought, and dynamic and informed dialogue creates common ground where we might cooperate with one another. It's essential for reaching some type of consensus. Most technical approaches, even great ones, have slight issues with them. And by keeping open dialogue, you can correct missteps, no matter how small they might be, earlier. And for those in leadership positions, being a more approachable leader doesn't make you less of a leader, but a better example. So authentic dialogue, right? So we don't hear a lot of people talking about authentic dialogue. You heard a Director Matur talk about how I'm pretty straight shooter. I talk pretty plainly. I don't know if that means I use authentic dialogue or not, but I do try to have meaningful conversations with others. And authentic dialogue is more than just a regular conversation. You try to have meaningful connections where you try to understand your differences of opinion. You try to examine the truths and you step back from your own. You don't get locked in. You try to step back and see something from someone else's point of view. You try to accept others, even if they are different from you, and empathize with another's perspective. Each individual brings a unique perspective to the effort. That's important to remember. Viktor Frankl was an Australian neurologist and psychologist best known for his book, Man's Search for Meaning, and sort of known more commonly as the pursuit of happiness. And he proposed that you cannot connect meaningfully with if you are a prisoner of your own thought or if you believe you have a monopoly on the truth. So the scientific method. So after you realize you're not always right and you try to establish meaningful connections and authentic dialogue, what's next? So the scientific method should be applied where possible as a logical, rational problem-solving method. It's not about philosophy or an ideologue or belief. And this can be, the scientific method can be applied to almost any field of study. One of the most important features of the scientific method is its repeatability, eventually allowing some hypothesis to become widely accepted. And science should always be open to new approaches and ideas, and we should be able to test these new ideas. As technologists, we should use the scientific method. Perhaps you think I'm making an obvious statement, but so here's an example. So you see the little picture on the right. When I was young and in school, we learned that atoms were the building blocks of matter, and atoms could only be broken down into 3 smaller particles: electrons, protons, and neutrons. Well, now we know, right, that there are many smaller types of elementary particles, much smaller than these 3 particles. But that would have been unheard of when I was in school. So we must never forget that everything we know can be proven through hypothesis and tests, and that this must be repeatable, right? That's the litmus test. But I will say that I have seen great and wonderful individuals, great technologists, turn into the worst cancelers when provided with new approaches or ideas that didn't match what they thought or believed, and often react with skepticism or downright hostility to their colleagues. And so we need to remember, right? Maybe I'm not right. Maybe I need to listen. So I've just provided an example of how science can change. But here are some other ideas that are in the current news of some science cancel culture that's ongoing. And where I've seen scientists really go at it. They can't even have discussions on some of these issues. They have separate conferences, and it's really holding the science back. And some of these are, we talk about mandatory vaccines, genetically modified organisms, stem cell research, and these are just a few. And I have no opinion, right? But we should be able to get together and have discussions. And where's the science? And let's discuss the science. I mean, the public stays confused, causes chaos. Politicians jump on the lack of firm science, right, and use it to their advantage. So we need to step forward and really be the thought leaders in some of these areas and stop fighting. So here's an example of what can happen to individuals when cancel culture jumps on scientists. In 2008, an individual named Colin Wright decided to pursue a career as an academic biologist. He was outspoken and passionate, and as many young professionals are when they first enter their fields. And he maintained blogs where he debunked pseudoscience and critiqued creationism and intelligent design, frequently launching head-on into debates with Christian conservatives. He is quoted that during this phase of his career and during these debates, he was often called wrong and stupid, but never a bigot. He says that the dynamic changed when he started graduate school in 2013, where he began discussing sex differences in the human personality and gender ideology. He pushed back against what he saw as unscientifically supported notions of male and female as social constructs, and that one's sex may be determined by self-declared identity instead of reproductive anatomy. When he pushed back against these claims as a scientist, he was smeared as a transphobic bigot. Fearing professional harm, he stopped engaging. In 2018, he graduated with a PhD in evolutionary biology from UC Santa Barbara, taking a postdoctoral position at Penn State. He was still choosing whether to not weigh in any debate because he was going to apply for a tenure track for some jobs. However, in 2018, there was an intensive media focus with, there was this grievance study scandal, bringing renewed focus on the academic misconduct associated with gender and sex. And he published an essay in Quillette entitled The New Evolution Deniers. Again, it was called The New Evolution Deniers. And I recommend you all read it. Again, I'm not taking a side in this, but what I read is an article from a scientist arguing on behalf of science. As a result of his article and others, he was attacked and has since left academia. The point here is that we should be able to have the discussion, and it has affected the technical community, and it is the technical community that loses when we are unable to scientifically examine and rationally discuss a topic. So technology and their uses can impact and even transform the culture and economics of existing systems and institutions. Technology is not neutral, and its uses changes lives. Technology can have profound impacts on our privacy, security, and even civil rights as users. Improvements are not inevitable. Designers make trades, and the most advanced product is not often the one that's widely accepted, and we must continue to push for advances. The people creating technology are its influencers. A lack of diverse ideas and representation could lead to further disparities between gender, race, and class, and we should all care about this. For those of us who create technology and who love how technologies empower us and improve our lives, this is why we support IEEE. That's why I support IEEE. Community engagement and consensus discussion is a powerful technology enabler. This is what IEEE facilitates through its collaborative membership networks, publications, conferences, and technical communities. So as we work together to support the mission and vision of IEEE, we must remain steadfast in our support for open dialogue, collegial discussion, and the use of standardized and peer-reviewed approach in support of scientific research. These will remain critical tools for successfully navigating our complex world. Without them, we would be forced to rely solely on intuition, other people's authority, or blind luck. While many of us might feel confident in our abilities to decipher and interact with the world around us, history is filled with examples of how very wrong we can be when we fail to recognize the need for evidence and supporting claims. It's important that each of us continue to provide support for collaborative, free, and open technical discussion on IEEE platforms, that we provide support for our colleagues, even when their viewpoints might diverge from our own, working to find common ground, that we uphold the IEEE Code of Ethics and participate and actively listen. IEEE is the world's largest technical professional society. Our members are vibrant, diverse, engineering and scientific professionals working across academia, industry, and government. Our members are committed to elevating their professional images, expanding their global networks, connecting with peers locally, and giving back to their communities. Our core purpose is to foster technological innovation and excellence for the benefit of humanity. IEEE's vision is to be essential to the global technical community and to technical professionals everywhere, to be universally recognized for the contributions of technology and of technical professionals in improving global conditions. Let's work together to continue to support what has been a long history of technical collaboration in support of this mission and vision. So as I close, I want to thank you all for your dedication and perseverance this year. IEEE is an international community unlike any other. There is no group on the planet that is driving more advances in technology across the widest breadth of fields and disciplines than IEEE. As you reflect on what I have presented today, along with the mission and vision of IEEE and the role you have to play, remember the reason you joined IEEE, why you like volunteering, and why you believe in the mission and vision. There are many reasons why I'm so proud to lead our dynamic organization. And one reason I will cite here today is that I see so many of our members who do remain committed to our code of conduct and our code of ethics. Please take note of my Instagram. My email address is skland@ieee.org. And please do email me if you have any concerns or questions about what I discussed today. And I'll stop sharing, and I think hopefully we'll have time for questions.
Okay, thank you so much, President Katie, for your perception of how the mission and vision of IEEE can still be supported despite the unprecedented situation that we are in right now. Actually, I have loads of takeaway, and actually, I can also relate to that cancel culture in the recent issue of Nash Daily in the Philippines, but I'm not going to elaborate that anymore. I have list of interesting questions here. So we are now in the part of Q&A. I will read a question. Number one, which specific part of IEEE Code of Ethics can be closely associated with cancel culture?
So the bullying harassment, that's the part that I would cite. And I would encourage everyone to go and look at the code of it. So I'd have to go and look, but the code of conduct really, but both. You're not, but the bullying and harassment.
Okay. So noted on that. There's this second question about cyberspace. As we cannot stop our personal data to go to cyberspace, do we still need to worry about it?
Yes. So one of the reasons that I never was on Facebook. I give a talk. Well, I used to give a talk on cybersecurity, and my talk was on industrial cybersecurity, right? So, and then you saw what happened this past year with all of the cyber attacks on the utilities and in the United States. And the reason I stopped giving the talk was because I couldn't keep it updated. Things were happening so quickly, I couldn't update it quick enough, so I stopped giving it. But it was funny. I gave it at an IEEE conference a couple of years ago, and somebody posted on. I'm not on Facebook, but somebody said they posted on Facebook that I scared them worse than Freddy Krueger from Friday the 13th or one of those movies. But I think good. I'm glad I scared you. You should be scared because cybersecurity is important. But so yes, so I've never been on Facebook because they just had they have leaks like 8 a year, and they just leak data of 500 million users. Why are you on Facebook? They're leaking your data. Break the addiction. Get off Facebook. But whatever, people don't care. Yes, they're using your data. They're selling your data on the dark web. People give out their data when they go shopping. I'm not on Twitter because they also use your data. With GDPR, you now have the right to be forgotten, thank goodness. So when you tell them, I want to be forgotten, they have to remove your data. In the past, it was almost impossible to get off some of these social networks. But yes, you should care, and you should do everything you can to protect your data. Don't give it out. Do everything you can to, get rid of the spam emails and that kind of thing, because your data is important, and people will sell it.
Okay, thank you so much for that advice.
Sorry, I don't mean to scare you, but it's.
I know. So we need to worry about this.
Yes, you do. I worry about it, and I take care of my data. I'm out there. I have a website. I'm pretty public, but I am very aggressive. I very aggressively protect my personal data. So you should too.
Thank you. So going back to cancel culture, I think there's another question related to that. How would you advocate diversity, equity, and inclusivity to colleagues who don't understand its importance in IEEE?
So here's what I've been pursuing this effort for many years, right? So started this when I was before I was VP of Technical Activities. I started working with WIE and their importance of having a vote and some stronger say. But it's not just about, people think that diversity and inclusion is just about women and I'm not minimizing, don't misunderstand me. Diversity and inclusion is about women, transgender, it's about everybody, right? But it's more than that. So the reason we didn't we didn't put another WIE group in technical activities, and while we started this in IEEE technical activities as diversity and inclusion, is because it is about making sure that all of our members from regions 1 through 10 have a voice. We looked around the table and saw that the faces on our committees looking back at us were mainly from the US, but our regions were growing in 8 through 10, and those members were not sitting at the tables with us in our committees. So how do we do that? We have to have a diversity and inclusion initiative. We have to make sure that our nominations forms, that our nominations processes, that people are aware, that we have voluntary metrics and reporting, so that people that are on these nominations committees are aware that we are not reaching out to members across the globe. So I think what you do is you tell them that diversity and inclusion is about making sure that IEEE is reaching out globally and including everyone. And it's not just about what they may perceive as fringe groups. And I know that's a bad word to use, but sometimes people are put off by diversity and inclusion efforts because they think that it's, the same drumbeat. And it is. We are trying to include everyone and make sure that the same D&I efforts that you hear about in like a regular corporation, but for IEEE, it means more. We're really trying to include all of our members across the globe. So maybe that would make a difference to them.
So probably, thank you, President Kathy, but we still have one more question for you. It says that the proverbial Damocles sword is well known, even after science begins with proofs and not really repeatability. The internet has shifted focus to adaptation and repeatability as soon as possible. How do we get back the focus to proofs first?
I think the scientific community needs to have a stronger voice. From what I've seen, the scientific community is a big bunch of chickens. There is so much garbage out there, and their scientists are being quiet. And I don't blame everyone. It's a scary place. But we're letting the media, we're letting the politicians commit scientific fraud. And COVID is the worst example of it, or the best example of it. And what's happened with this COVID pandemic is there's so much scientific fakery out there, and then the politicians jump on it, and then they use it to create chaos in our societies. Now, I'm not making, it's just we've got to get a handle, and it's not just that. It's there's example after example after example, and that's not our field, right? We're not a bunch of medical researchers. But there are examples. I'll use what's going on with Facebook and all the social media, the algorithms that are being used, and how what they've done to the internet. We've got to start taking a stand and having a larger voice. And clearly stating that if it's not scientifically correct, or the correct method, or the correct approach, that we work collegially to make sure that it is. We push for the right approach. We don't yell and scream. We just say no.
Okay, thank you, President Kathy, for of course, patiently addressing all those queries. And it has been an amazing and rewarding discussion for everyone. So I guess we are now on to the next phase of the program. Kindly scan this QR code to give us your feedback so we can incorporate your suggestions in our future webinars. So this time, let us invite our equally hardworking and dynamic director-elect to give us the closing remarks and vote of thanks. So another round of virtual applause to Professor Lance Fung.
Good evening, good morning, and thank you, Jennifer, for the introduction. And once again, I take this opportunity to thank the organizing committee for this very successful R10 talk. I've been attending a few of these, and I must say that it has been truly fruitful and beneficial to the audience. Well, as far as tonight is concerned, we feel so privileged to listen to the talk by President Kathy Land, on the topic of the internet and also the role of IEEE, etc. So when I go through the slides, it really a lot of things go through my mind. Because we're really looking back to the history of internet, we're talking about the start in 1983, talking about the time before that. But really, it's go back to the time when I first started my career and my study as well, back in the early 80s, whereby I used a punch card in the computer as the very first form of a data input. And then you go through, the time of the openness, and in particular, just sharing, recapping the statement, saying that, the internet designed with no, gatekeepers over the new contents and services. Well, it was really a grand idea, but unfortunately, over the years, we have seen that the freedom has been abused, and also been a lot of restriction being put on it. So we are still yet to see how the development will go for the years. And also we take a look, in terms of some other discussion in terms of its internet technology. Also interesting to bring, President Kathy Land to bring us to the attention of this cancel culture. And we do see that this cancel culture is really significant over the years. You see that it's really the them against us, the type of mentality that really you see some very slight statement and some objection, of the difference in opinion, that you can see that complete separation. And then also such a diverse and extreme type of comment against one another. But sometimes we begin to think about what we used to learn about this particular phrase, saying that I disapprove of what you say, but I will fight to the death for your right to say it. But unfortunately, we think that this is no longer being recognized by a lot of people. Then, it's being brought on to the other very important aspect, which I myself also feel very passionate about, is in terms of the promotion and upholding the high standard of the professionalism and the code of standards and the code of ethics within IEEE. Because I personally involved with the MGA right now, some work group is looking into the operation manual on some of these issues. And also another equally very important statement from the IEEE is the diversity, equity, and the inclusion statement. And I would strongly encourage all the participants and every member to take a good look at it, and we need to uphold the standard. And then we go on to talk about some of the dialogues, some open technical dialogue, the authentic dialogue, the scientific methods, and we need to understand the technology today. But all in all, I must say that I would like to use this opportunity just to remind everyone that what President Land has tell us, what can we do? I just take the opportunity to repeat what she has said in the slides, to provide support for collaboration, free, open, technical discussion on the IEEE platforms, support your colleagues, uphold the IEEE Code of Ethics, and participate and actively listen, and support the scientific methods. And also the last slide, she has beautifully concluded and summarized all the main points. We need to support, we need to work in a teamwork and communications, we need to trust, we need to motivate one another, inspire one another, and so they lead to success. And all in all, we are part of the IEEE, we are the big family, we're the community. We aim to achieve the mission and vision of IEEE. Okay, once again, I take this opportunity to thank you, President Land, for your insightful and very fruitful sharing. And I also hope that every participant in tonight's talk is able to make a big reflection, and then also uphold our IEEE Code of Ethics and conduct, and achieve our mission and mission for the benefit of humanity. Okay, thanks again, Kathy. Thank you again, everyone. I pass it back to you now. Okay, thank you, Jennifer. I'm finished.
Next slide. Okay. Oh. Next slide. Okay, we would like to thank people behind our R10 Talk, the team behind R10 Talk. And of course, this is a collaboration between the different committees in Region 10. Okay, the Professional Activities Committee, Young Professionals, Women in Engineering, and Student Activities. So once again, please, you can give us your feedback, and we love to hear from you. We love to hear your suggestions. Connect with us also in our social media accounts, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube channel. So also watch out for our upcoming webinars. But in the meantime, we can have a group photo. May we invite all the panels to turn on their cameras for the much-awaited photo op with our guests.
Jennifer, before we go, can I make a quick reminder to everyone? There's one IEEE TV live broadcast. It's on the topic of women in science and technology, volunteering to lead. And I think we should really promote this one. And Kathy is going to speak in that again. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, please sign up for that. It's women from 4 different major associations, and we're looking forward to that.
I did.
Thank you. Thank you.
If possible, you can paste the link in the chat group.
On a count of 3, I would request all the panelists to turn on the video for a good photo. On a count of 3, 2, and 1. Statement. Thank you, everyone.
Once again, can you please go back to the slides? So I just would like to promote our upcoming webinars. Yeah, we have this webinar this October of Professor R. Sunday. Okay, so again, your feedback is very important to us. Thank you so much. All right, so once again, our heartfelt thanks to our President Kathy for gracing our 9th R10 Talk. And to all the participants, we are looking forward to see you again on our 10th R10 Talk this October. And kudos to R10 Talk team for the amazing job. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you once again, Jennifer. Bye, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
The party.